Right, I believe we're live. Yes, are we good, guys? Back? Cool. Well, welcome everybody to our first Women in BIM event for Durban. My name is Tammy Fenter. I am the AEC lead here at Modena Durban. And I just want to thank you for being with us today. It's my privilege to host today our first event. And before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping issues. We are going to keep the talk to about an hour, about 45 minutes to an hour. Don't go, because afterwards we're going to have some great prizes afterwards, which we're going to hand out. And just during the course of the day, if you will, the course of the session at least, if you find that you've got questions to ask our guest speaker, please do so in the chat. Candice will be manning the chat for us, and we'll get that when we actually get to the questions. So yeah, and I guess without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest speaker. This is Lauren. Lauren Hayden is the director at Peyton Taylor Architects. And it's actually such a privilege to have you here, because I know we've got quite a history in terms of you've been kind of in my blast zone for the last almost 2 decades with Varsity, and we studied together. Yeah. And so it's been great in a sense, just watching your journey, and also kind of either being on the playing field with you or watching from the bleachers, because obviously with business and obviously being involved from a Modena Peyton Taylor relationship, that's also been really, really great. So why don't you start off telling us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, love this part. So my name's Lauren. Some people know me, some people don't. I'm an architect. I've been practicing for, I think, as professionally for about 10 to 12 years maybe now. I did my university degrees at University of Natal and then UKZN when it changed. Have practiced in the States, practiced in Durban. Yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell professionally, I suppose.
And you've served on quite a few committees as well, am I right? So
yes.
It's been, I know it's been SIRE KZN and then SIRE, National SIRE.
Yeah, so I basically served for about 10 years on SIRE KZN on the regional committee, and I was vice president there for 4 years. I'm on a bit of a sabbatical at the moment, but I will definitely go back. And then I was deputy treasurer and then treasurer at the SIRE national office.
That's awesome. Yeah. So giving back is the thing that you enjoy doing.
Yeah, I think it's very important. I think as architects, we, and I suppose it's in every aspect of my life, you can't complain about something unless you're doing something to affect the change.
Sure.
And I think it's very important for everybody to kind of give back in any way they can. And obviously everyone's commitments are different, but it's a big part of my life. I think it's very important to get involved, to be proactive, and to help out the industry. And if that's as a regional committee member or hire an exco or even within the UIA or whatever, I think it's very important for your personal growth to challenge you and kind of see the rest of the world and how other people view architects.
Yeah. I can imagine that. That's it's a challenge in itself. But I also know when we were much younger. I remember when I first met you, you told me about your folks moving to the States, and it's like that core unit. So it was your mom, your stepdad, and then your 3 siblings. And I always found that very fascinating, because most of us we're waiting to move out of the house and waiting to move away from our parents, just be I just want some freedom. And that's kind of what student life is about. But you actually had to live without your core units, and where we were having conversations with our folks half on the way to the kitchen or something, your entire relationship with your family existed over Skype.
Yeah, so my parents and my family unit immigrated late 2003, and I decided to stay in South Africa. I was studying at the time, and I didn't want to interrupt that studies. So I basically decided to stay here. So at the grand old age of 19, I was on my own, managing a household and finances and all those wonderful things that come with adulthood. But yeah, I mean, it was challenging. It was difficult. I mean, I miss my family immensely in those first couple of years. And I think when you're doing university, especially undergrad, it's your first kind of time out of home. So you're pushing the boundaries and you're trying to understand who you are as a person, but now having to try and understand yourself on your own and having to make those decisions of like, cool, this is my pot of money. I have to go jawling because that was the most important, and I'm joking.
Of course.
And then feed yourself and put petrol in the car and have enough money for printing and model making materials, et cetera, et cetera. It was quite interesting, but not something I regret at all. I think it definitely molded me into the person I am today. And I think I've always been given that opportunity from my family in terms of being able to control my own life and have that responsibility. But yeah, it was difficult. I had weekly Skype conversations because WhatsApp and phone calls weren't really...
Way before that,
I know, right? Before Facebook. But yeah, so it was difficult, but we got through it, and we are a strong unit despite that. And they did support me from afar.
And you got to see them quite often as well. When I say quite often, once a year, I remember you used to go over.
Yeah, no, I used to go over for 2 months at a time back when we actually got 2-month holidays at university, because now 15 days doesn't seem
not so much. But you also had the opportunity to work locally there, because there was that time between undergrad and masters and stuff where you had to do work experience. And
yeah, I did an internship there. So in South Africa, we have that kind of gap year that we are forced to take. In America, they have something similar, but a little bit different. So yeah, I worked at a firm called Kennedy and Associates, doing primarily medical stuff. Very interesting, but got a very intricate. But I got at a very young age, I got a very good exposure to different types of work and different ways of working, because in America it's very different to how we work.
Feet and inches as a start.
Feet and inches, let's not go there. But it was quite nice, because what I realized is we're very lucky in South Africa. We get exposed to so many different avenues and aspects of architecture. It's not just sit and draw. You get to do kind of shop fitting, and you get to interact with subcontractors, where in America it's a lot more controlled, and you have your kind of set tasks and whatnot. Yeah, I think it comes from that whole thing of being scared of people suing you, so you stay in your lane. So I definitely did find that when I started working in South Africa, I was exposed to a lot more of the industry, where in America it's very much you in your lane and you stay in your lane. Yeah.
So it kind of leads me to my next question. So like that experience has been vital, obviously, in a lot of what I can imagine, what might not have been directly related to some of the projects that you've been working on, but I suppose the scope of things. And I know you were involved with the Promenade project when you were working at Michael Todd. So everybody knows the Promenade. If you've been to the beach, you know about the Promenade. What was that like? Because I know that was one of your very first kind of projects that you worked on in like post-masters, I think. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, so after America, I came back. I decided to do my master's here, even though I was accepted to a university in the States. It was just not feasible at the time. And I made the decision I want to pay for my own studies, just because I don't want to burden my folks. So I came back, did masters, and then my first real job was with Mike Todd. And it was amazing. I mean, I was given so much responsibility and latitude to really take ownership of a project. And the beachfront project, it was the run up to 2010, and it was the first phase of the beachfront. So from Ashaka through to not Blue Lagoon, just before, where the underpass goes through to the stadium. And it was exciting, and it was so different, and surprisingly not architectural, even though we did do the Dairy Beach node. And I worked under Brandon Robertson and Mike Todd, and it was a big learning experience for me. We had multidisciplines, we had civil engineers, we had so many people, big teams, big client, the city, where we really had to step up. And so I learned a great deal, but it was so rewarding, because whilst it might not have been solely architecture, it allowed me to kind of get involved in that kind of urban realm, and be exposed to different players on a kind of bigger kind of stage. So it was I think 3 years or 4 years of my life that was intense, but I've been very, very blessed with the types of projects that I've been exposed to and being given an opportunity to work on, because every single time I think that I've kind of reached a pinnacle, and I'm like, okay, no one can give me another project that's going to be harder than the one I've just done. All of a sudden, this next project comes, and I'm like, okay, cool.
But
and
it stretches you.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
is.
It's like, if it's easy, everybody would do it.
Well, yes,
You know?
and I think for me personally, I have to grow. I have to be challenged. So anything that someone can throw at me that requires me to reassess and learn and understand and push my boundaries, I will do, because I think it's so important.
Like this.
Like this. I think it's so important that it's a way of growing, and it's a way of not remaining stagnant. And I think learning is so important in every aspect of your life, and especially your career.
Absolutely. So, like, I can imagine that a lot of, I mean, with you living on your own, with working on these complex projects and having all this newness and with a mentality of growth, it was almost a natural progression to know that you weren't going to just be, you weren't just going to be another architect kind of thing. I've never pictured you as someone who would just be like, that's where it stops and that's my ceiling, you know? So when I heard like that you directed Peyton Taylor, I was just like, yeah, of course, you know, why wouldn't you, you know? So that makes perfect sense. But I remember you starting working at Peyton Taylor, and I was working across the road at ZAR, and I think that was quite great because we saw quite a lot of each other at that stage still. And
across the hallway, not across the road.
Yeah, across the hallway. It was across the hallway. It was across the road after a while, but anyway. But the point that I'm trying to get to is, like, I remember that there was a fair amount of apprehension at this thing that years later has become like such a huge part of who you are and your career and all of that stuff. And it's quite an impressive thing, because Peyton Taylor is how old now?
136, maybe.
That's a bit of legacy, hey? That's quite a bit of legacy that you've kind of taken ownership
33.
of. Well, with Dennis, obviously.
Yes,
Let's not
and
exclude Dennis, is also there. And we'll get to that in a second, but like, what did that journey look like initially for you?
Yeah, so I think there's always apprehension when you're changing careers or businesses, companies. I think I was with Mike Todd's for, I want to say 4.5 or 5 years, and that's a long time to be with a company. So the apprehension to join Peyton Taylor wasn't around that it wasn't a good firm, it was around would I fit in? And I think that's something that everyone struggles with at the end of the day. But you kind of have to take the leap. And I had known that I wanted to get more involved in the commercial realm. I think that's where I feel at home as an architect, and Peyton Taylor was a good stepping stone, or was a good kind of move or change of pace for me. So I joined in 2013. Ian and Barry were directors at that point. It was different. It was a different practice. I came from a very loose environment at Max to a very controlled environment. And that's not a good or a bad thing. It was just the difference. So I think I've always wanted to kind of reach a ceiling and then move the ceiling up and then keep going. So when I think Ian was looking at handing over the reins because he would retire in a few coming years, both Dennis and myself definitely put up our hands, and it's something that we both wanted to take on, because we wanted to push ourselves, we wanted to elevate and kind of see where that realm would take us and if we could handle it. So we were made associates and then directors, and it's been a journey. It's been amazing. I think I've learned so much about myself, and obviously about business and how to run a practice. And it's not easy at all. It's really not easy. And it pushes you out of your comfort zone. And who knows if I have gray hairs, but I color my hair, so we'll never know. But it definitely was quite difficult in the beginning, I would say, just because you come from a realm of, you one of the firm, you're one of the architects, you're one of the people. And there's a unity in that. You're in the kind of trenches together. You pulling off these deadlines together, et cetera, And in that kind of promotion to associate and then later on to director, it was definitely a shift in people's perspectives of me, and presumably Dennis as well, where obviously there became a them and us now, where you're having to manage and you're having to run a business, and it's not just you or the collective you're making a decision for, it's for the practice and the longevity of the practice. And to ensure that in 6 months, a year, 6 years time, these people that you've hired have a job and there's security and safety in that. And also then get the nice work for everyone to be happy to do. So it has been challenging, and it was a bit of a transition, but I think I've gotten through it. Dennis has got through it as well. So I think we're in a very good place. I mean, it took time. It's always going to take time. But I think we've had great guidance from Ian and Barry before he retired. And yeah, I think Payton Taylor will go from strength to strength as a result, because I think Dennis and myself are both the type of people to push the boundaries to ensure that we're growing as well as our people are growing. And I think will lead us in good stead for the future.
Absolutely. Now, you became a director at 32.
Okay, yes.
Am I right in saying that?
I think so, yeah. Yes, 5 years ago. Everyone knows my age now.
So firstly, that's very young.
Yes.
Okay, and I know a lot of the people, I knew the crowd then at Payton Taylor, and I know they weren't all younger than 32 either.
No.
So I think my question is, and I ask this question because I've seen so many times in organizations that we've been involved with, is that, you know, there's this new blood, there's this new leadership, and you have the few that struggle with it, but eventually they kind of piece it apart in their heads and they can be like, yeah, no, this is cool, I can do this still, you know. Then you get those who are like, yes, let's do this, this is a great idea. And then inevitably, unfortunately, you get some of those people who are like, rightfully or wrongfully, I think it's time to move on, it's not something I can submit to. And again, that's totally okay, but there is always inevitably that shift. And what was that like for you guys? What was it like for you specifically? And then also and what did that look like inside of Payton Taylor?
Yeah, so there's always going to be a transition. So I explained my personal transition, but obviously everyone had to do their own transition. And Dennis and I were both, I think, one of the youngest directors, or both of us each, kind of made a director. So when you're having a lot of, or many people that might be a little bit older, who might have been at the practice for longer, and they have to now fall under you, for lack of a better phrase, it is a bit of a difficult transition for them. And unfortunately, as you say, not everybody can make that transition in their head. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it takes a bit shorter. But I think it is a transition, and we have to just all understand that these things do take time. And you have to build their confidence in you and their respect. And I'm hoping that what Dennis and I have done, what I've done in the last 5 years, has proved that, and that has shown the people that were there before I arrived that I am a worthy director and I am a worthy leader for them. But yeah, it was difficult, and but I think at the end of the day, all you have to do is just keep at it, keep being the authentic person you are. Be it for good or bad, it is who you are. And if you just kind of maintain your authentic self, I think at the end of the day, the people will be won over.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So, like 130 years, or 133, 130 somewhat years, okay? And now there's this new fresh blood, and inevitably with fresh blood comes fresh thinking and fresh context. And what was the new thing that you guys brought together? I know there was, I think you said at 130 years, you guys decided to have a rebranding of and a kind of redoing of Payton Taylor. So talk to us about that.
So when Dennis and I became directors, we, with Ian, obviously discussed, who are we? Who is Payton Taylor now? So having been around from 1887, we've morphed, we've had to change, you've had to get new clientele, you've had to stay relevant. So we sat there and we said, we feel we need to rebrand. And I think that's a surefire way of kind of putting a fresh coat of makeup on, so to speak, and presenting this face to the world. And I think so and that was kind of together with our whole philosophy that we wanted to keep the team quite young and dynamic. I think at one point our average age in the office was 30,
Wow.
which makes me feel old.
Wow.
But we love that. We love that we have young guys in the office or young girls in the office. They bring energy, they bring a dynamic kind of new way of thinking, fresh ideas, they push the boundaries, and I think that's critical in any firm. You can't kind of do what you did 30 years ago. It's not going to work. You have to stay relevant. So this, so this kind of rebranding was hand in hand with that philosophy. And we went through quite an extensive process over a couple of days of who is Payton Taylor? What is our mission statement? What do we believe? Where do we see ourselves, etc. And this, I can't remember the phrase offhand, and I'm sure my firm will be upset with me that I don't, but it's 130 years of architectural excellence. And I think we have this legacy. We've always had this legacy, and it's a fantastic legacy to own. But you have to keep adapting and keep pushing the boundaries in order to stay relevant in this current market and to kind of compete with the top practices within South Africa. And so I think this kind of fresh look and this fresh kind of branding of Payton Taylor did just that. It kind of reinvented us in a way, but we still have that legacy attached to it.
That's awesome. Guys, can we get the logo up, if that's okay? Talk to us about the logo. So it's different to what it was, and it's quite edgy and quite funky, and it's monochrome, but there's something that I just love about it. But I know with you, there's a story behind it. You know, there's always a story. So I'd love to hear the story about the logo.
So the logo, again, so it came out of our 3-day workshop with our brand manager. And we work very closely with Assembly Studio as well to develop this logo. There were so many iterations, you have no idea. And nothing kind of felt right. We were looking at the infinity sign at one point, and I think Dennis and I both looked at each other and we were like, can't do that. And we kind of got into this thought of what makes a table stand? I know it sounds so silly, but like you need legs, you need something for a table to stand up and a practice to stand up, and you need 3 legs. And it was quite coincidental, at least 3 legs, and it's quite coincidental that there was 3 directors at the time, and there are still. And so this kind of tripod thought came into our head in terms of the pillars of Payton Taylor and this and 3 is a lovely number and all that. And so this kind of infinity-esque sign, tripod 3 thing kind of morphed into our logo. That being said, I know there's so many people have said to us like what they think the logo is, and we actually quite like that because it gets interpreted by so many different people so many different ways. Some people think it looks like the play sign on some PS3 or 5. I don't know. I'm not a gamer, I'm sorry, but some people have said that. We have an obsession in our office with samosas. I know it sounds so ridiculous, but I think we order samosas every day or every second day. And it's very, very coincidental that our logo looks like a samosa, but it was not the inspiration. I think it was just a happy coincidence. So yeah, that's kind of it behind it. But it was so layered. I mean, I think, and we like the idea that people can take different things away from it. It's not, it can be by itself and it's very recognizable, and that's what we wanted. So when you see our logo, it doesn't necessarily have to accompany the text. You know who it is because through brand recognition.
It's distinct, yeah. And what has the feedback been on that? So just from colleagues, from...
I think, when we launched it for our 130th in 2017, it was well received. I think it needed to be kind of this fresh take on what architecture is. We love the monochromatic. We didn't kind of want it to be timeless. It's not going to date. It's not going to age. Maybe we'll get tired of the logo. Maybe we won't. But I think it was the right move, and it's the right look and feel for where we are currently.
Okay, absolutely. That's awesome. So I have to ask, and it's this whole, I think everybody is so exhausted by this topic already, but like, I think it's an important one to kind of just to mention, and that's the good old realm of 2020, where the world literally stopped because of a little virus that caused such big chaos, huge chaos. And I know everybody's so over this right now, but you know, we've as Modena, we've had the privilege of standing back and kind of going, well, this is what's happening to our clients, and we've assisted as much as we could. And then we've seen clients who unfortunately just had to shut up shop. We've seen clients who struggled. We've seen clients who've gone through their own thing. And then there's the handful, and we can count you guys as one of those who've thrived in spite of it. What did you do right? Kind of thing.
We were incredibly lucky. We had an international client that we were very busy with at the time, and still are, and it basically got us through 2020. And it was very serendipitous in the time that we had to do all the kind of drawing work, and we weren't based on site yet. So the fact that the world closed their doors and no one could go anywhere didn't really impact us, because where we were at the time, we didn't have any active sites, and we were doing a lot of the design-based or a lot of the drawing-based stuff.
Good timing. Wow.
Yeah, it was very, very good timing, and we were just incredibly lucky, and incredibly lucky to have solid clients that we had lots of work with.
Yeah.
And obviously all the work in South Africa kind of was put on hold because there was so much uncertainty. So yeah, I think that's definitely what got us through 2020. But more so, how it got us through 2020 was everyone had to work from home. And what I loved was that everyone's like, I don't know, 27th or 28th of March last year, everyone's like, oh yeah, but don't worry, it's only going to be 3 weeks. It was the biggest joke, everyone. Everyone's like, what? Hang on. So what turned from 3 weeks into 5 weeks, and then this kind of remote working, was the fact that we had to change the way we did business. And I think a lot of firms had to do this. And we were incredibly lucky again, because we had made that switch previously, a few years back, into kind of cloud-based drawing and collaboration. So that definitely assisted us in delivering our projects and delivering our deadlines, because we had the ability to work whilst everyone was in their little houses dotted around KZN, and we did not have any downtime. I think we were probably busier then than we had ever been the year before.
Actually. Wow.
It was incredible. It is incredible. So I think the biggest challenge we had was if people had enough bandwidth to access the models. And again, I know that we were incredibly lucky, and not very many people had that luck. So we are very grateful to that client.
And what I know of you guys is that you've got a really good team. Like I've had the privilege of spending some time in your office, just chatting to some of your guys, and your people are exceptionally, like, you can see they enjoy what they do and they enjoy their space. So I can imagine that in that season, there wasn't a question whether they would perform or whether they wouldn't perform.
No,
it was just like, this is what we do.
We have an amazing team. Amazing team. We are so lucky with the people that, and we've employed smart, I hope. I mean, we have a rigorous employment kind of interviewing session, but we have amazing staff that are so dedicated, and they are definitely Peyton Taylor people, and they are, they're dedicated. And then, as you said, like, there was no, like, they had a deadline. They're like, okay, cool. How do we make that happen? How do we achieve that deadline? And we had endless, like, Zoom meetings. Obviously, this was before everybody was like, which platform do we use? So between Zoom and Teams, we had endless meetings and coordination sessions, et cetera, But there was always this dedication and this, I would hope, love of Peyton Taylor to actually to put your head down and complete the deadline to the best of their abilities, which they did, and they do time and time again.
That's awesome. So what I think has been really great, so I'm an Instagram person before I'm ever a Facebook person.
Agreed.
But what I've seen is you guys have got quite a good social media presence now. And kudos to whoever's running that, because I think it's dynamic, it's simple, it communicates so well. And what's really been great to see is, like, it really gives you a little bit of that insight as to the workings of Peyton Taylor, which has been great. So what was the thinking behind that? Was it just, again, staying relevant? Was there something else behind it? What was the thought behind that social media campaign?
Yeah, so I think you have to stay relevant, and social media is here to stay. And you can decide to what degree you will play in the arena and what platforms you'll use. And whilst I know a lot of people, I don't know how to say this, but they have their preferences, as you say, your Instagram, and other people like Facebook, and other people like LinkedIn, and other people like TikTok, and I'm not going there as much as Dom would like me to. But yeah, so it was a case of staying relevant, and the millennials are coming up, the Generation Zs will be coming up after them. You have to talk the language of the people you are trying to interest or get work from, or kind of put yourself out there too. So that is why we made a concerted effort in the past. However, we realized that it's something architects aren't good at. Well, sorry, I mustn't say that. It's what we're not potentially good at. We don't have time to sit and dedicate that. And I think
there's a reason they have social media marketing.
Exactly. And we needed to give that the best chance it had. And I think by myself or Dennis or somebody else in the office, doing it on an ad hoc basis was just servicing the thing, but not really impacting or changing everything. So we did employ somebody, Dom Montiel, and she's been amazing. And she knows exactly what we want to get from this kind of experience. And that's kind of started at the beginning of this year. And we said we really need to try and make it happen. And I think she's found the great balance between showing our work, because it's a visual. So we're on Instagram and Facebook, and I'm sure we're on a host of other things that I don't obviously check regularly. But so she has this lovely balance of showcasing our work, but also who we are as people and what's important to us. So you'll have noticed that it's not only just buildings or renders of buildings or photos of buildings. We like to include the office life. We like to include who we are as people, what we believe in. A quote here and there, which is very difficult for Dennis and I to sit in and be like, okay, cool, we've got all this work to do, but we have to get a quote for Dom. All right, let's think about this quote. Exactly. So it's been interesting, but I think it's definitely striking a lovely balance of who we are. And I think that's what we wanted to do, is just communicate who Payton Taylor is. And if you like it, fantastic. Welcome aboard.
Yeah. So what I've really loved, just in this conversation, the conversations we've had before this, is that there really is this. I don't want to say it's a need, because I think a need is something you feel you have to do out of a fear of a knock-on effect, but there's this want to stay relevant and to stay on top of things and to move with the times and to embrace the latest technology, embrace the latest skills and whatever else is out there. But I must admit, there's still a fair amount of people who walk around with a "if it ain't broke, don't fix it" kind of thought. And whether that's from a point of a financial point, or whether that is from a point of just a fear of changing or not understanding the unknown, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it is difficult. I mean, these technologies that are available to us are tools and assets that can make our life easier at the end of the day. And I think with architecture specifically, 3D modeling and Revit and that environment is becoming more and more the norm. And 2D drawing work is almost considered archaic in a way, because it's not clever. And I think it is very difficult to make that transition, and it is very difficult to kind of draw a line in the sand and say, you know what, we either do it or we don't do it. And a lot of practices adopt this kind of hybrid to try and get us over the line and to make that change. I think it's important, though, that we do. And obviously I'm speaking from a Payton Taylor point of view. When we were very lucky. One of our clients back in 2015 insisted we use Revit, and it was one of our pilot projects. But there was a period of time where we were trying to do that hybrid, and it just was not working. And Dennis and I decided that first of the year, I can't remember what year it was, 2017 or 2018, that every single new project that was coming into our office was going to be done on Revit or BIM or the cloud. And we just had to do it. And it is difficult. And the skill set is, you need to kind of grow it and develop it, because everyone was learning. And there was a bit of a transition. I think it's more readily accepted now. But it was a tool that we decided to take on because it spoke to our kind of need for relevance and to stay current in technologies, as well as being an architect and everything else that we've spoken about. But I don't believe we would have been able to deliver some of our deadlines without it. I mean, and like, I know we wouldn't have been able to. So in a lot of ways, Revit was, and the cloud-based kind of modeling was like a saving grace for us, because without it, I don't think we would have been as productive or as or met our deadlines or any of those things in 2020. So like, I think everyone's journey is different, and you have to kind of make that decision for yourself. It is a big cost at the end of the day. I don't know what Autodesk can do to reduce costs, but that's another story for another day. But we've seen the benefits that working and adopting that kind of environment or ecosystem has done for our practice. And it does allow us to deliver faster.
Yeah.
It means we have to think more in the early stages, granted, but it helps us in the later stages.
Okay. So let's move on to something a little bit more that straddles, I think, the personal professional boundary, and that's this whole idea of leadership. So what, as a woman in leadership, and I say that like very hesitantly because I know you know your stance on this kind of thing, but like what do you find there are challenges being a woman in leadership? Kind of thing?
I think naturally so. I think architecture is very much a male-dominated industry, and it always has been. And I believe that the generation before me did amazing work and made such big strides in kind of this more equality between females and males. I think it's always going to be at the back of our minds as female leaders or female directors or people in power. But I try and not let it define me in every aspect of my life. I feel it's something that is acknowledgeable, it's difficult, but how can I use what I know and who I am to my benefit and to the benefit of my practice? And I think with being a woman, we think differently to men. And I think that's what's made Payne Taylor so great, is that we've had that balance. We've had both male and female leadership. And I think, yeah, I think it's always going to be as difficult as you make it or believe it to be. I think there's a lot to be said for acknowledging that some things are unfair and unjust, but how can I make it better? And I suppose that's where it comes back to getting involved with kind of your institute, or getting involved in something other than your practice or other than architecture, because I think the more you interact and the more you kind of define yourself in those realms, the better you will be able to lead in architecture.
And like I can imagine that just from being kind of groomed into this leadership role, because it was a grooming process. I would imagine in the beginning. I don't think Ian would have just thrown you straight into this kind of thing. There were a lot of personal lessons and professional lessons that you had to learn. Like, can you give us some examples of that? Like some things that you had to learn the hard way, some things that were like a bit of a shift, required a bit of a mind shift, and kind of stepping out of yourself to kind of take something on. Because I think sometimes people think that, you know, it's just, oh, well, it's me and I'm just going to do this my way. But what I do know is in leadership, there's definitely this whole thing of, this is not about me. This is about serving the people that I lead. And talk to that. Like, what are some of the lessons that you've had to learn the hard way, and the shifts you've had to make? So
there's always this grooming period, but I also feel that we need to constantly keep growing and keep learning. So I'm by no means at the top of where I should be, and I hope that I will continuously better myself and keep pushing and keep growing to be better and better in time. But some of the hard things, I think trying to think for the collective and not just for yourself, whilst it's quite simple to say, to every single decision you make needs to be almost benchmarked against, cool, does it benefit me, the company, my directors, my staff, everybody, my clients, everybody. So I think what was quite difficult for me is not having to be accountable, but people will view a decision with one lens. And it might be the lens that's the most important to them at the time. But at the end of the day, you as a director or as a leader have to look through multiple lenses and make a decision that will be in the best interest in serving the most people in terms of the collective. So that was quite difficult, and something that I constantly try and keep kind of learning and keep growing on. We've spoken about the whole them and us. That's always going to be there, I think. I mean, as soon as you're in a position of power, it feels like a them and us. It feels like you're not a part of that collective anymore, as much as you want to be, and much as you were in the past. But I think with this responsibility, it's unfair to put that responsibility and pressure and risk, etc., on other people. So this them and us will, unfortunately, I think, always be there. And I think you can try and close the gap as much as possible. But it is quite lonely, to be honest. And but I have great support in Dennis and Ian, and so I suppose that's good, and my peers in the industry and friends. So
yeah, because I was going to touch on that, because I remember in our previous conversations we were talking about the space that leadership is a lonely place. And I mean, I've spoken to you about this, and there's a couple of other friends of mine who've like stepped into that role of directors and leaders, and there's definitely that shift that happens. But tell me, was there ever a point where you felt that there was that pivotal switch that went on? Like, you know how you go like, okay, I'm not in the transition anymore, now I'm a director. Like where that hat kind of started fitting, or was it just a gradual step-by-step for you?
I think it was a gradual step-by-step. I don't think there was one pivotal moment. I do believe I woke up one day and I was like, oh, wait, okay, that's happened. And it was more an acknowledgement of how far I had come and how much I had kind of grown in that space of time. So I don't think there was a particular moment where I was like, oh, look at me now. I think it's always been a gradual thing for me. And to be honest, it's like you kind of look back and you do see your naivety a bit, and a lot of your early decisions in early years, but we always are moving forward. And you can't, as much as you can look back to kind of take a benchmark and kind of see where you've been and better yourself, you kind of have to keep looking forward and keep your eye on the prize and just do the best you can.
Absolutely. So like there's a lot of, like you wear your position well. Like you've never been apologetic about the fact that you're a woman. As long as I've known you, you've never been like, you know, I am a woman in leadership. You've just been like, I'm a leader. This is what I do. I'm an architect, you know, and I've admired that about you for a long time.
Thank you.
So, but I know that there are still some people who kind of struggle in that space. And in some instances, it is still a struggle. I mean, let's not ignore the fact that in some cases it could still be a struggle. But I wonder, like, what would you say to someone like that? What would your response be when people are living under that kind of, I don't want to say it's not an inferiority. I hope everybody's understanding where I'm getting at, but just that kind of thing that they might just feel slightly less than, in a sense.
Yeah, look, it's a very difficult question, because I think everyone's on their own journey and their own path, and they have their own baggage and their own items and things to work through their life. I think I've been very, very fortunate in that I've always been self-assessing and understanding and unpacking who I am as a person. So I always encourage people to do that. I mean, the more you know about yourself, the more you can understand your decisions or understand your reactions to people and items and instances. It's such a funny thing, because when you said like I wear my leadership role well, it's such a strange concept to me, because I don't view myself as a leader. I view myself, maybe I'm a director, but I'm an architect at the end of the day, and I'm just trying to keep this 130-year practice afloat and do my best so that it keeps growing and keeps developing, so I can hand it over to the next generation when I one day retire. So it's a bit of a strange one for me, because it's like I don't know if I view myself as a leader. I mean, if other people do and they get something from that, fantastic. But I think people have their own journeys and their own paths to follow. And I would only just say that the more you can know about yourself, the better I think you would feel in your own skin, and the more confidence you would have. I mean, it's such a funny thing, but I think I definitely felt a shift in who I was in my late 20s. And I think your 20s are all about this kind of self-discovery, exploration, pushing your boundaries, like understanding who you are, what you want.
Aren't you glad that's what
I'm so glad that's it. And so I think, like, for me, I had an aha moment in, like, I think I was about 27, 28, when I was like, I was comfortable in my own skin. I knew who I was. And I was unapologetically, and I hope I'm still am, this is who I am. And if you don't like it, I'm not for everyone. But I think everyone, I don't know, this is my opinion, I think everyone should strive to be or have that experience. Because
I agree with that.
That self-confidence, you are responsible for your own self-worth, for your own acceptance of yourself. You can't benchmark or expect others to give you that. You have to get there. And the only way I know how to get there is through self-awareness and self-exploration. And it's a constant journey. I constantly check myself. I'm constantly trying to learn more about myself and how I tick and how I do things so that I can temper them or better them. Or if they're good enough, then I'm like, oh, that's who I am. So mixed. Yeah.
So it's funny you say that, because I remember when we were in varsity, there were these emails that went around.
Oh, golly.
With the questions. And and between yourself and a couple of us in the group, we always used to send these emails out like, what's your favorite perfume? What's your favorite this kind of thing? And it's like, it's funny you say that, because it's like, that thing, it was so like fun and innocent then, but it's still a continuation of like the way you see yourself and stuff. And to end off, I've got a lightning round of those questions.
Oh, goody.
So for those of you who just want to know what we're going to do now, we've got a lightning round of questions just to get to know Lauren and just to kind of see the other side of her that's beyond the professional. She knows some of these questions and some of them she doesn't, but like, let's get going on that. So, greatest band of the 90s?
I don't know if they were the greatest band or if they were considered the greatest band. Counting Crows. I love them.
That's a good choice, mind you. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
I oscillate between mind control and time travel. Yeah, I'm currently in a time travel, like I'd like to, but I suppose that's also because of COVID. Like I'm not able to see people or my family and extended family. So I'd like to just be able to travel to a different time where I can.
Okay. 2 items you want with you on an island, if you could only take 2 items.
A hammock and a machete.
Okay. Cats or dogs?
Both. I love both, but I identify probably more with cats.
Okay. The last gift you've received?
Oh, my friend Jackie made me the most beautiful, like chunky knit blanket.
Oh, everybody needs a Jackie. That's awesome. If you could choose one song to play every single time you walked into a room, what would that be?
Oh, it's such a cliche, but Eye of the Tiger.
Is that the Katy Perry version or the original?
The original.
Okay, just checking. Okay. If you weren't an architect, what would you be?
Probably a psychologist. I find that half of my job.
So much sense.
Half of my job is obviously listening to people these days. So I don't know. Maybe I'd be good at it.
Oh my gosh! And if you could relive a decade of your life, what would it be?
The first one.
The first one.
I love my childhood.
Being little, hey.
Oh,
my kids have it so good. That's all I'm saying. Disney princess you associate with?
Probably Belle from Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, she's lovely.
Oh, she just has so many books. I really want her library.
Yes, mind you. First thing you do in the morning?
Make tea.
Oh, I forgot you're a tea person. I'm sorry. Favorite guilty pleasure?
I love watching Hallmark movies and Disney animations.
Oh, okay.
Like I'm addicted to both. So they're just so happy and easy, and
it's
like
easy watching.
It's always going to be a happy ending, and everyone's going to be happy at the end. I'm just very happy with that.
That's awesome. One thing few people know about you.
Oh, I don't know how personal you want me to get you. I don't know. I could probably live on a boat very happily. I don't need to live on land.
Oh, okay.
Random. If I could own a yacht and live on that, I'd probably do that tomorrow.
Pet peeve to end off with.
Pet peeve. I get really irritated when people don't close the tap. Sorry, the dripping of water. I'm just like,
is anybody from Durban Water watching? Here she is.
It's just the drip, 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 and like just so wasteful. Please close the tap.
Oh, that's funny. Lauren, thank you so much for being with us. It's been so great having you. So there have been some questions from, that were submitted with the registration form, which we would love to go through. Hopefully you guys are still around to listen to some of the answers. So this will be a collective between myself and Lauren. So one of the questions that came through said, BIM enables us to produce and manage documentation in a faster and more orderly fashion during the construction phase. But the expectation for faster drawings has drifted across into the design development tender stage, generally require pen and paper and a lot more time and thought. How do you deal with the pressure of expectations for faster designs? I'm going to pass this one to you, darling.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think it's always gonna come down to the client you have and the relationship you have with the client. And we're very fortunate for some of our clients. They are, I don't want to say understanding, but they understand what the role of the architect is and the processes. So whilst I know clients can push you and you basically designing whilst you foundations are going up on site, it's not the ideal circumstance, but it is currently, I suppose, what our industry is about. But I think you have to just be able to try and push back as much as possible, because if we don't do that kind of fundamental stage right, it's going to have repercussions later on. So, I mean, for us personally, we have a little bit of that, and we just have to keep talking to our clients and just tell them, like, it's just physically not possible to do what you're asking me to do, even with a tool like Revit.
Yeah, I suppose there's only so much you can do. Hey?
Exactly.
Next question. Okay, professional fees seem high. Should one negotiate? Again, I think this is more an architecture question.
Yeah, it is a difficult one. And I think there's a bigger conversation that is currently being had or has been had multiple times over the last couple of years, is whether or not we as an industry have kind of devalued ourselves by trying to remain competitive in our fees and kind of one-up each other and to get the job for whatever reason. I think it has allowed developers and clients to know that we are almost bargainable, that we will reduce our fees. And I think it speaks to us valuing ourselves and what we do. And whilst I don't agree with it, I think the only way we're going to change that narrative is by all banding together and actually being a unified voice.
Absolutely.
I mean, the lawyers won't do it. You have to still pay them a fee for them to send you an email asking them to call you or you to call them. And you're like, I'm paying for this, but okay.
Yeah, no, it's
so
true.
yeah, it's a bit of a difficult one, but unfortunately, until we all join together and actually have that collective voice, I don't think it's going to change.
Yeah, no, it's true. There's a question here about juggling work and family and time for oneself and then still growing in all three aspects. And I think this is something that's actually quite personal to me, because it's something that I think for myself, I mean, I've got 2 little boys. I've got the family of, we work very much with the construction industry, and it's tough. It does its thing. But agree or disagree, but I would imagine for myself, and I don't know if it's the same for you as well, I think that has a lot to do with boundaries almost, and understanding and being intentional about the time you spend wherever it is. Because let's be honest, you can be at the office for 8 hours a day and still not be productive.
That's true.
Just like you can spend a whole day with your kids and not actually have quality time with them. So I think for myself, I would imagine the answer to that question is that we need to start deciding what our goals are, in terms of that work-life balance, and understand also that the balance is not a quick fix, a one size fits all. I think the balance is very much contextual.
Yeah.
And what is applicable this month is not going to be applicable next. I always say it's like a budget. You know what I mean? When you're working with your money, there's some months are going to require more from you than others. But it's all about what we do, where we invest our time, the decisions we make, and what we do with that time. And at the same time, I think if you're saying yes to something, you also have to understand that you're saying no to something else. So
it comes down to priorities and boundaries at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
You decide what you want to occupy your space and your time with. Whether your balance is 50% work and the rest family and yourself, or 0% yourself, that's a decision you make at the end of the day. And
Absolutely.
I think it is achievable to balance everything. It takes a lot of work and a constant reminder daily that this is my decision at the end of the day.
I've got a friend, and it's insane because she's people who have just got incredible capacity. Like a friend of mine, she works in the medical industry. She's doing another degree. She's got a sound business.
That's amazing.
She's got 2 kids and her husband, and she still finds time for herself. So to me, like, if you can spread yourself, right? If you can spread yourself across so many different areas, the only thing that I can think of is that the time allocated to all these different things is intentional, and it's made the most of. So there's no loafing, there's no wasting, there's no spending time with your kids when you're actually on the cell phone the entire time.
I think it's a case of like, don't beat yourself up. Don't beat yourself up if you're not finding that balance. You know what I mean? Everyone's different. Some people can handle everything, some people can't.
Absolutely.
So I think just do whatever you can.
Do you
do you, and just and know that that's enough. Because at the end of the day, it's your life, and you have the power to
You're
control
accountable for it, I suppose, at the end of the day. So where am I? Sorry, catching up with my notes. Okay, how can a woman succeed in a male-dominated industry?
I think we've touched on this earlier. I think everyone's advice is going to be different, and I think for me, it's just being who I am, and acknowledging that I might not be for everyone, and some people might like me for whatever reason, and some people might not like me because I'm too bossy or too whatever. But I think, as much as it's controversial, maybe we should take the narrative out of like women in architecture. Just be who you are, be a good architect, be a good person. And at the end of the day, if people don't respect you for that, then they're not your people.
Yeah. Just checking time with my people in the back there. How are we still doing for time? Do we have time for more questions? One more question. Okay. How to best use our architectural qualifications in other ways besides in an architectural practice, and how to align this with personal goals and purposes? I think it's a tricky question, but we discussed this briefly before, and I love what you had to say. It's almost like architecture doesn't just teach you buildings. Do you want to elaborate on this?
So I think what the biggest thing for me that architecture has taught me and almost developed a skill within me is that problem solving aspect.
Absolutely.
The fact that you have to stand on site and you're scratching your head looking at this problem, and you have to make a solution and make a solution that's in the best interest of everybody, and the design still looks good, etc., etc. And I think that skill is definitely translatable into all aspects of your life.
Absolutely.
That being decisive and saying, right, these are all the options that I can choose from to solve this problem. What's the best fit? Absolutely. And that's constantly evolving. And I think the more we do it and the more we go through life, that kind of refinement happens. So I think that's definitely a skill that I think you can take from architecture, from studying architecture, being an architect. I mean, I'm sure there's hundreds more, but that's something that comes to mind.
Absolutely. I think that's great. I think we're going to leave it there, guys. So thank you for everybody who's still online. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate the interest in what we do here at Modena and our Women in BIM series that we've been doing. So again, thank you to Lauren. It's been so great having you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
And thanks. Firstly, we just want to say thank you to Westfield Baptist Church, who have been so gracious in letting us use their facilities. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Autodesk, for the funding. Obviously, they've also been great in making sure that we get, this Woman in BIM thing going. Appreciate the Modena team who've been so graciously helping us today. And just for everybody's attendance and interest in what we do. Thank you so much, and have a great, great weekend.
Until we want to leave it, you and I were flying on an aeroplane tonight. We're going somewhere where the sun is shining bright. Just close your eyes and let's pretend we're dancing in the street in Barcelona.